Hello everybody and welcome to another comedian's interview for my blog and podcast Arichcomiclife. My name is Richard Gill and my blog describes my experiences of watching over 1,000 comedians and counting over the last 46 years. I'm delighted to welcome my special guest today, the wonderful comedian Mr. Jeff Innocent. Yay! Hello, mate.
It's an honour and a privilege, Richard. It's an honour and a privilege. Although I want to know why I'm number 70 something. That's what I want to know. But we'll let that go.
You are in my top 25, my friend. It's just how it fell.
Well, you're in my top 10 audience members. I know that.
You're very, very kind. You're
Thank
so
you,
kind.
man. Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for doing this. We're going to spend the next 45 minutes to an hour or so talking about your comedy career.
Wow. Okay.
And I'd like to go right back to the start and ask you, how did you become a comedian in the first place, please?
Thank you for calling it a career, first of all. I just always been hanging on, you know. I've never really used the term career. I probably would say that I've always been a comedian, although not officially or a professional comedian. I've always been one of those kids, you know.
Yeah.
Always liked making people laugh. If you asked anybody at my school from you know, I don't know, 50 years ago, what do you think Jeff would have been doing? They would probably say a comedian. So nobody was surprised that I ended up becoming a professional comedian. Always used humor as a child, always liked making people laugh, always performing to the family or in my gang, but actually left it very late to be a proper comedian. I was about 40 years old when I did a workshop for my 40th birthday. Somebody bought me a workshop. They said, you always said you could be a comedian. You always said you'd be better than those people. Here's your chance.
Wow.
So for my 40th birthday, somebody bought me, that's 95.
Yeah.
1995. Somebody bought me a workshop with the great Tony Allen.
Oh, superb.
Right, you're not going to get a better start in life than that.
Yeah.
And he, for those people that don't know, is one of the architects of the whole alternative comedy movement.
Of course, yeah.
The alternative cabaret in those days. You were probably there, Richard.
Yeah.
So I started my workshop with him, and over the next couple of years started doing open spots, and took to it very quickly, I think, because I was older, you know, and I don't even know if you're allowed to start at that age now. It might be illegal. It's become so young now. They probably wouldn't even countenance somebody of 40 or 50. I don't know, I could be wrong. And I started doing it, and possibly, Richard, within a year, I was earning a living from doing stand-up comedy.
So it was very swift when you started off.
It certainly was.
Yeah.
I had been thinking about doing comedy for quite some time, but what not put me off is I had a good job, but then I left my job and went to university for 5 years.
Right.
In the at the beginning of the 90s, and it was whilst I was at university as a mature student. Whilst that was happening, there was a comedy boom with jongleurs.
Yeah.
Lots of comedy clubs were opening it. And I think I would have done it sooner if I could have seen how I could earn a living from it.
Sure.
Not because I'm mercenary, but I was an older person with children. And I thought, if I can earn a living from being a comedian, I would start doing it. So what happened about the same time as I was 40 and in the mid-90s, jongleurs were opening up lots of clubs. It stopped becoming a type of marginalized alternative thing and became fairly sort of mainstream. People could earn a living. So I thought, okay, so did the workshop with Tony Allen. And funnily enough, Richard, I was the only one on the workshop that actually wanted to be a comedian, because don't forget, lots of people go on workshops for all sorts of reasons. Just for the fun of the workshop, for their personality, mental health reasons, or, you know, they might be doing Zumba one month, stand-up comedy the next month, flower arranging the next. So I was very serious about it, and I've even got the video at the end of the 6-week course. You do a show, what they call a workshop. And I've got the video of that workshop. I still own that.
Brilliant.
I haven't looked at it for quite a few years, but I used to look at it every now and again and think, my material is not very good, but there's a certain rawness and an unbridled energy that you lose when you start, of course. You have to be careful, and I've been trying to get back to that for many years, actually. But I haven't seen it for a while, but it was a great experience. I didn't start doing open spots immediately. I think I don't know what happened, some mental thing where I thought, oh, I can't do this. Maybe some anxiety, maybe nerves. But Tony Allen actually came around to my house and said, where are you? What are you doing? You should be doing this.
Wow.
And I thought, okay. So then I started, and then I was earning a living.
I first came down to London 30 odd years ago, 1992, but my brother was down here in the late 80s, and you're right, we used to go to the Comedy Store all the time, and the first bill I ever saw was Richard Morton compared it.
Wow.
This would be 1988.
He's still alive, you know, Richard Morton.
He is, he's been on this. He compared it. Steve Gribbin was on.
He's still alive.
Yeah, he's been on it.
I think both of these people might be the only people still doing it who are older than me.
Yeah. Dear old Linda Smith, God bless her. She was on the bill.
Rest in peace.
Hattie Hayridge was on.
As well.
Yeah, Hattie Hayridge was on.
Wow.
And topping the bill was a comedian called Charles Fleischer, who was an American who could do accents, and he was hilarious, but he was never heard of again because he went to Hollywood and he voiced Roger Rabbit. So that's where he made all his money from.
He didn't need the money after that, did he? But why did he need to be schlepping around? Yeah. That's amazing. Good for him.
And I did a similar course, not a comedy course, but I did like a half-day writing course, and everybody around me wanted to be reviewers. And I went to to see the person who ran it, and she said to me, "We forget. Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, I'm not a reviewer. I'm not a critique. I'm not a diarist. I'm not a reporter. I'm a member of the audience, and I'm out to have a good time." And I thought, if I can I had a big spreadsheet of every single act I've ever seen, and I thought if I can somehow enhance that into an infuse, which is what I call my blog, and it's just taken off. It's been extraordinary.
When did you start that then,
Richard? Well, the spreadsheet would be about maybe 10 years ago, but the blog's been going for 3, and I'm close to nearly 100,000 hits, which is extraordinary. So and
you get free entry now into clubs.
Well, folk are very nice, but I still like to be a fee-paying member of the audience, because you need all the support, you know.
Of course, we certainly do, everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Pay more.
So. You're a comedy stalwart. You've had an incredible career. Where was your first ever proper gig, and what was it like? You're doing these 5-minute spots.
Well, the first ever actual gig was at the end of the workshop. That's not a proper gig, I suppose, but it's the first time I was on stage doing stand-up. Well, actually, no. Let me just say this. When I was a teenager, I was very interested in acting, and I wanted to be an actor. That's what I wanted to be when I left school, which was a very fanciful thing for a working-class kid from the East End to think in the 1960s. And I was part of a couple of theatre groups. One was called the East End Abbreviated Soapbox Theatre, which operated out of East Ham. And I tell you who else was part of that after me, the poet who wears the glasses. What's his name?
John Hegley.
He does poems about his glasses.
Fantastic.
Yeah, he was part of that theatre group after me. And we used to, well, it was the late 60s, early 70s, so we used to do street theatre and political plays in the street and so. It was a fantastic experience. In fact, actually, it was a life-changing experience in that it was a group of hippies who came into the East End. They set up a big squat. That's where they lived. And out of that squat, they ran a theatre group. And I was one of the local yobbos.
That's
I
brilliant.
had always been always fancied myself as an actor, always into performance.
Yeah.
A lot of time with them, and I'm very thankful. And at the same time, I was also part of the Newham Youth Theatre, which was a little bit more progressive in a way. They had local writers. They had a writer, and I think he's died now, called Billy Colville,
Right.
who wrote a few political plays.
I've heard of him, yeah.
And I was part of that. They were. We did some stuff at the Half Moon Theatre, which was in those days in Ailey Street in Aldgate. It wasn't in Commercial Road where it ended up.
Yeah.
In an old synagogue, and they used to be Chekhov, and all of and Brecht. It was that era. And we did a play there, and I remember we did a week run there, and during the interval, I decided that I was going to do stand-up comedy. So must have been about 15 or 16 at this time. Now, obviously, I didn't know about having your own material, but I took jokes from around, just off the TV.
Yeah.
With no critical engagement, just what made me laugh, of course. And I'll always remember this, and it stuck with me. I remember, so I'd come out in the interval in between the play and be a stand-up comedian and tell jokes. I was cracking on with my stuff, and don't forget, this is 1970 maybe, and a woman shouted out, "That's sexist." And I remember being totally stunned and thinking, what does she mean? What is sexist? I've got no idea what she meant. And that was the start of an education.
Yeah.
So I did, in fact, do stand-up comedy in a small way then, and I always used to tell jokes to people. But then fast forward to so quite a gap between 1970 and 1995, of course. So I did the workshop. We did a show at the Tom Allen Centre.
Yeah.
In Stratford, which is more or less opposite the Theatre Royal Stratford, actually.
Yeah.
Community centre. We did the show there. It wasn't open to the public as such. It was friends and family, and I just got the bug.
It is, isn't it?
Boy,
yeah.
Yes. And I remember Tony Allen said to me, "Well," he said, "you brought the house down, man." And I remember being so ahead of my game. At least I remember halfway through going, "Wow, this is easier than I thought it was going to be."
Yeah.
And of course, that truthfulness, that commenting on how you feel, is very much part of stand-up comedy anyway.
Very much so. Yeah.
Being in the moment, being in the room.
Yeah. It's of its moment, isn't it? It's when you go. I love so much to go and to look forward, see what's on a bill, and I like to take a lot of friends with me and sit and see what they think. And then when the lights go down, you just make me laugh, entertain me, and it's just the best feeling in the world in the audience.
Wow, that's great.
Must
to
be like
hear
that
about
on
it from the other
stage.
side, because I don't think about it in that way. I don't think about the audience and if they're getting excited or not. We're just busy thinking about our staff, our performance.
Yeah.
What sort of relationship we're going to build during that performance.
Yeah.
That's great to hear that.
Yeah. No. All the way. I mean, that for me, I'm obviously passionate about the subject, but because it's such a positive thing, what's not to love? It's like you go there and I laugh. I know I've been blessed with this laugh. I should get the laugh insured, but
your laugh is distinct, isn't it? It's distinct. And I think most comedians could probably tell your laugh. They could probably. I've never experienced this, but I bet you could be on a bill, and when you go off back to the dressing room and the other person's part, you go, "I think Richard Gill's in tonight." Sure, I heard.
Well, that's very kind. The story of the
you pop up in different clubs.
Yeah.
When I think I first saw you at, now I could be wrong, could I have possibly first seen you at the old Bloody Har gig in Hanwell?
Yes.
That a venue that
Yeah.
I think I might have seen you there first of all.
A very dear friend of mine lives in Hanwell, and we went to I can't remember the name of the pub. It's not there anymore, but it's part of a chain. What was it called?
Well, that's got to be.
But it was certainly a pub in Hanwell, and you were on the bill, and Joe Caulfield was on the bill.
Okay.
And I can remember you headlined that. And the wonderful thing about your act that I love is how you bring everybody together. They just love the fact that you walk on and you appear extremely confident when you walk on because of the type of act
I must tell you this, Richard, and I don't want to sound pretentious, but for me, how I like a gig to be is that I love them so much I don't want to get off.
No.
And they love me and they don't want me to get off.
Yeah.
If when I reach that Zen moment, I think, I've achieved what I like to achieve.
And that's all there is to it. And that's wonderful. When before you go on stage, do you get nervous at all? I mentioned about all this confidence.
Not now. When I first started, terribly nervous. Terribly nervous for a long while, and it was a very awkward position for me, Richard, because it wasn't as if I was someone in my 20s learning to do something. Possibly being nervous and insecure would have been understandable. I was a man in my 40s, so it was a very awkward situation to be nervous and new about something around lots of young people. Whereas in the outside world, I wasn't nervous about anything. But I used to get nervous. But I think certainly for me, what happens is once you're confident about your act, once you know that it works, then you lose the nerve because you're going out with confidence. It's not a bad experience.
It's all about doing as much as you can, isn't it, and gaining experience. I think I'm confident as a person in life. And I think my gig starts as soon as at home when I start ironing my shirt. The whole ritual starts then. So I hit the stage running, Richard. Really. I'm already being a comedian as soon as I start getting dressed. When I'm on the train or in the car. By the time I get to the dressing room, I'm there. And I think a lot of my act is about swaggering and being confident. Not in a forced way. That's how I am. So I relish and enjoy that type of. That's brilliant, and it's interesting you say about the acting and the confidence as well, because other than my blog, the most creative thing I've ever done, I wrote and appeared in a play, which I wanted and I still might take up to the Edinburgh Fringe, but we put it on. Myself and my friend were in it, and our other friend directed it. And we put it on for Comic Relief, and we got over £2,000 for 3 shows, which was incredible. But the play's called The Applicant, and it's basically about me coming to London from Carlisle, and I've got a successful girlfriend in London, and I've never been interviewed for a job, and it's my journey trying to find a job. And every job I go for, I get more and more confident. And at the end of it, when I get given my ideal job, there's lots of plot, but the interviewer kills me. So the last scene is me at the gates of heaven or hell with God being interviewed by God, and God saying, we've been watching you on planet Earth, and we think you'd be ideal interviewing corpses between heaven and hell. And I shrug my shoulders, and that's it. Now
that's great.
Thank you.
It doesn't surprise me because you've got a certain sort of Butch Allen Bennettness about you.
Yes, I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. So the play is basically waiting room and interview. So I run out and I'm really nervous, and the audience are there and there's nobody else, and I start talking to them. So I wrote all these monologues to try and get the story going. And of course, the first night, having written it and rehearsed it, I ran out and I forgot the monologue, and I was like a rabbit in headlights. I just went to pieces. And my question is, do you approach acting differently to stand-up comedy, to writing?
I've done a lot more stand-up comedy than I have acting.
Yeah.
And of course, with acting, you're playing a part that may not be you.
Sure, yeah.
And it may be a part that isn't a confident character in itself.
Yeah.
Well, the problem I probably do, because usually when I get any acting part, it's more or less playing someone who's pretty much like me. You know, sort of a Cockney geezer. Or, you know, when I was in Call the Midwife, I played a bloke called Cakey Crumb, the Cockney storeholder, and so. You know, the difference is, though, in terms of confidence, is when you're not actually a full-time actor and you just act now and again in some of your part, because often someone will see you on stage and they go, "Oh, you'll be right for Cake and Crumb." That's how I got that part. It's a very small, tiny part, but you're working with people that are professional actors. They've been acting as much as you've been doing stand-up comedy.
And you learn a lot how to project yourself.
They're really, they're amazing. They're amazing. And sometimes you think, wow, I don't know if I should be here. But it's an amazing experience. You see their skills and everything that they can do. And so I probably enter into everything with a degree of confidence. From being a stand-up comedian, I think it helps with your acting. You're used to
brilliant. It's so good.
People, nothing phases you. The camera's nothing when you're used to standing in front of hundreds of people. Probably do that.
When you mentioned Alan Bennett, we used to go to a lot of recordings of the Now Show and the News Quiz at the BBC Radio Theatre, and the guest one particular week was John Culshaw, the impersonator. And I don't know whether you've ever been to the Now Show, but they have a section right at the end of it where they read out, they give the audience a daft subject and they read out the funniest answers. And ours was, what's the most stupidest thing that's happened to you at school? And genuinely, when I was at school, I was sitting in the sixth form one day and I fell asleep, and some git Tipp-Ex'd my glasses, and when I woke up I thought I'd died. That genuinely happened. I was like, So John Culshaw read this out at the end as Alan Bennett.
That's
and
amazing,
it was genius.
Hey, Tipp-Ex, you better explain what that is to the kids,
man. It's to correct. Make corrections with a pen.
There must be people that don't know what that is now, mustn't there?
My glasses were absolutely ruined. Amongst other award nominations, you have won the Best Live Comedian in 2016, Best Live Club Comedian at the UK Comedy Awards, and was runner-up in 2015, 2014 and 2013. Well done and congratulations. Well deserved. What was the experience like, and what's your view of competitions?
Well, I don't really like competitions in any way, certainly not with culture.
Right.
However, and being runner-up was always the bridesmaid, never the bride. I think with that one, what's good about that award is it's other comedians vote for you.
Yeah.
And it was quite a surprise, because I'd never considered how other comedians saw my work. But I was older than them, and I don't socialise that much. Not because I don't like comedians, but I've always been a bit older, so I never hung around with comedians, so I don't always know what they're thinking. And I was actually quite shocked that they'd all got together and thought, wow, Jeff's doing some good work. So I was really chuffed, really happy with that.
That's brilliant.
Telling people for ages. And in fact, I can't believe it was that long ago. I'm still telling people.
It's great.
So I was very pleased about that. But also what I thought was good about it was that I had turned a corner just before then as well.
Sure.
And started approaching my comedy differently, and was taking it more seriously and thinking about it more, and developed great sort of ambitions, intellectual ambitions about what I could do with my comedy. So it was a great thing, and I'm very thankful. And it spurred me on, actually, to take myself more seriously and to look at the future and think, right, this is great, because when you've been going for a few years, and there's some of the people that have been, you can give up. There's lots of comedians that have been around as long as me. They've earned a lot of money, maybe, which I haven't. Or their wife's had a good job. They've paid off their mortgage, so they can take their foot off the gas. Or they've lost interest.
Yeah.
But I think I I had a new interest, a new lease of life. I've gone through some phases in comedy, and around that time, just before then, I remember I'd been really thinking about what I do, having an agenda, having an artistic and intellectual agenda.
Sure, yeah.
But that reflected that had been appreciated. So I was really happy about that.
So would you say at that point, I've asked a lot of comedians this, was there a point in your career where you thought, yes, this is what I can do well, I'm going to make a career of this, I'm going to give this a go?
Well, I think almost immediately I thought that.
Yeah.
But often, you see, during that, but I still don't think, I think looking back, I wasn't as good as I could have been. I could still earn a living, I could still be good enough, but I think during that period, a lot of us worked at Jongleurs comedy clubs, and I don't want to criticize Jongleurs comedy clubs, but there was a culture during those days of it being very clubby, audiences were drunk, you know, they had a club 1830 culture about the audiences. So it's very easy to concentrate on confidence, on performance, and not think necessarily about what you were talking about or having an agenda as such, other than being a great performer. So I think I was possibly a good performer, but hadn't really developed the intellect side of my comedy during those years.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I always thought I could do it. But I mean, even now, actually, Richard, I still don't think I'm doing it as well as I'd like to, or in the way that I'd like to. I'm still working towards getting it, you know. And every now and again, I had a viral video during lockdown. So even though I wasn't seeing audiences, they were seeing me, and it was on Facebook and Twitter, and it was going onto WhatsApp group. And I was even now. The weekend I went to the train station to buy a ticket with a mask on. I said, "Can I have a ticket?" He went, "You're the guy. You're the guy." Yeah. So that keeps happening, and that's the first time in all these years where that performance, I thought, "Yep, I'm just about doing it how I really want to do it." In that clip. So,
well, what I wanted to say to you is that you are genuinely one of the funniest comedians I've ever seen in the 45 years that I've been watching it.
Wow,
and whenever your name is on a bill, I know I'm going to have a great time, and you never fail.
Well, I'm still not as funny as I want to be, so watch this space.
I'm keeping coming to see you then.
I'm under construction. I'm work in progress at all times, mate.
Well, it's wonderful.
And that's not false modesty, believe me.
Let's move on to Edinburgh. I am very fortunate to go to the Edinburgh Fringe every year it's my holiday.
Wow.
I go for a week. And
so did you win the pools or something years ago so that you could just leave this life of leisure?
No, I just thought stuff is. I want to live my life, and I go and I have a great time. I go to Carlisle in the summer, so it's only an hour away from me. So I do days. Carlisle's my home city, so I either do days there or I stay over in cheap accommodation or whatever. But I see about 50 shows in a week. And I need a holiday by the time I come back. What was your first Edinburgh Fringe like? When was it? Can you describe it?
I went about I can't remember exactly when it was, around 2000, I think.
Right.
Can I just say, I've only been twice to do a solo show in Edinburgh.
Right.
I mean, I go to Edinburgh, I love the town, the city, and I go there to perform in clubs.
Yeah.
But I've never really been somebody that's embraced going to Edinburgh to do the Fringe as a performer.
Yeah.
And there's lots of reasons for that. One reason is that it's an art fair, but it's also a trade fair. It's an art festival, but also a trade fair.
Sure.
So because I came into this older, I've never really thought that I'm someone that agents are going to be looking for. You know, it's very expensive to do as well.
Yeah.
And I think because I'm older, I don't really want to stay away for 28 days with a lot of comedians getting drunk and having fun. I'd rather be at home. And also, I think I've always had another agenda that I think there's one of the things about Edinburgh is it's developed a kind of elitism. where people think that to do so-called non-club comedy. I think we've had this false polarization where there's Edinburgh shows and club comedy. And I think when you think about how long stand-up comedy has been going, the Edinburgh Fringe has been going for a very small part of that.
Yeah.
The whole idea that stand-up comedy is a long-form, hour, theatre type, intelligent, intellectually stimulating form of comedy, whereas club comedy isn't. It's something I've always thought about, and I always thought that maybe what I can do is to do more interesting comedy, but in a club environment.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So I've always worked hard to make my club shows as intelligent and challenging or as rewarding as going to Edinburgh. So that's
brilliant.
been an agenda that I've been always tried to do.
That's fantastic.
So does that make sense?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, the first year I went, I got it out of my system that I wanted to be a stand-up comedian because I could make people. I believed I could make people laugh in pubs and whatnot, and I knew a promoter there, and he said, "Well, come on, we'll put you on a Monday afternoon in the Haymarket, an old folks gong show, which couldn't be any worse." And I walked out, I wrote this script and I walked out. I've told a lot of comedians this. And the first thing I said to them was, people used to think I looked like Eddie the Eagle Edwards, but I can't see the resemblance myself. And of course, I'm his double. I've met him and he couldn't believe it.
Okay, I never thought of that, but now you say it. Yes.
And
yes.
Some old bloke at the back of the room just went, "Fuck off," and gonged me off.
Oh, no.
After about 30 seconds.
Oh, no.
So the promoter said, have another go. So I did the same thing and I lasted a bit longer. And I went off and I said, never say never again. But my place is in the audience supporting all the brave people that can do it. And it seems to have worked. So that was my experience of doing it.
Right.
But the difference there, I think, is when you walk out, or when a lot of the professional comedians walk out, they know, as you said before, you don't seem to not care about the audience, but you want to make the show as encompassing and try to get everybody involved without targeting them or whatever. You know, you have such universal stories that people can relate to, that they just find you so warm and endearing in your presentation, and it works a treat.
There's another thing, yeah, it does, and it's great. It's great. I mean, one good thing about it, and we could maybe talk about this in a while, is that I do like to spend an hour on stage.
Yeah.
When you can, and it's great for that, of course. But let me tell you a story that sums up, because I think you can go to Edinburgh. I certainly did the first time, you know, feeling very worthy, and I'd go up with this very worthy show. And I remember, and it was okay. It was a bit of a 3 to 4 star show, possibly, on a good night.
Yeah.
But once I finished the show, and when I went outside, a group of people that were inside the show were talking to each other, and the woman said to her friend, "Well, you know, I've seen him before at Jongleurs, and he was really funny then." So it's tried to, I thought, yeah, you know, you come up here with these highfalutin ideas, but you've still got to be as funny as you would be in a club, and it's trying to get those people.
Yeah.
That's what been my agenda really in the clubs. And also, often with Edinburgh, you can go up with worthy shows, but you're preaching to converted. It's a much tougher, I think, to do something interesting in a club setting.
Yeah. I know what you said before about Jongleurs and the club atmosphere. I used to go to the Comedy Store and Jongleurs all the time. I used to go to the Camden Town one, and the resident compere there, who did most of them, was Tim Clark, and I'm sure I must have seen you there as well.
Yes,
because
I spoke to Tim the other day, actually. He's still going, and he's still full of ambition, and he was saying, writing lots of new material. He's older than me, Tim, actually.
Wow.
We compare notes on, there's not many comedians who do this. We talk about where we're working, so maybe Manchester or somewhere, and we compare notes on how cheap it was for us to get there without senior citizens rail card. So he would
Fantastic.
say to me, "Oh, I went to High Wycombe the other day from Balham. Guess how much I go? No, he won't. Nothing." So,
I was very honoured early on in these interviews. I managed to interview Barry Cryer, and he was 86, and that man is extraordinary with his stories about working with everybody, and that was an absolute joy. So
he's a proper legend.
And so my answer to that, I suppose, is age is just a number. I'm turning 54 in August, and I feel as I'm 25. I'm having the time of my life just doing it all.
I certainly think if you're a performer, or certainly in stand-up comedy, it's about your relevance of what you're talking about, not how old you are.
Right.
A lot of younger comedians that may be irrelevant, and a lot of older ones that are relevant. So.
You've performed stand-up comedy in Vietnam, China, and India, of all places.
I've been all over the world. It's amazing.
I was going to say, how do audiences compare to the UK? Do you get different types of audiences?
Well, in a way, when one's agent or promoter tells the world about all these countries you've been to, in a way, it's a slight con, because most of the time you're performing to British or expats, British, Australian, American, Canadian, Irish people that are living in these countries. But there's always a percentage of indigenous people there as well. So rarely in these countries am I performing to a Vietnamese audience.
Sure,
So the audience response is largely made up of the expat response. But it is fun, to interact with, to see how someone who's from Vietnam reacts to a Cockney geezer, on stage. But I think actually where you're really performing to foreign audiences is in Europe, because in Europe there's no expats; they're just European, so they can speak English.
Right.
So they come to an English comedy night, whereas in Vietnam or most of those places they're British. However, I did, Kuala Lumpur was a local audience. Doing comedy in Kuala Lumpur. Who would have thought?
That's amazing.
Bernard Manning would never have done that. Actually, when I went to Indonesia and they picked me up from the station, a local driver, and when you go to countries that are third world countries, it's a very chastening experience. It's not that you're going there to be a millionaire; you're only really earning a living, but you see the world, you see a side of the world. And actually, I think I'd only been there 5 minutes. The car knocked somebody off their moped.
No.
They weren't terribly injured, but suddenly we were surrounded by a crowd of people demanding money because they'd knocked a child off of a moped.
Wow.
And I thought, 5 minutes, man. But so more than their response, I've got to comment on the fact that what stand-up comedy has afforded me is to visit so many countries. And I don't know if that circuit is still there, Richard, that expat circuit. I don't think it's there quite the same. There's some stuff going on in Dubai.
Yeah.
But I haven't, within 10 years, I've been to the Philippines, China, Indonesia, Vietnam. It just goes on and on and on. I've got about 3 passports, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. A friend of mine who I used to work with, I'm on reception at a big secondary school, and he used to be a teacher there. He did a similar thing to you. He took a comedy course, won it, and he's now in Dubai teaching and running a comedy club, Yalla Laps, and he's having the time of his life. He said a lot of the English comedians come over as special guests, and this is probably, I would guess, what you did as well.
Well, a special guest to perform or to teach, or
to perform on the comedy nights. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
So, well, in Dubai, for example, there's a comedy company called Laughter Factory, and they have a tour which is Abu Dhabi and Dubai.
Right. So it goes all round. Yeah.
You do about 6 to 8 to 10 gigs in a 2-week run.
Yeah.
And you get to travel to lots of places. So it's an amazing thing. I can't say what country's been the best.
No.
But I mean, I did enjoy China because it was so different.
I'd love
obviously,
to go.
India was incredible as well. India was a local audience. Now, this is fascinating. The Comedy Store opened up in Mumbai, okay? And it was there for a while. It's still there now, I think, I'm not sure. But initially, the bills were British comedians with 1 or 2 local comedians. And they were local people. However, Indian people are, they have the same colonial history, the same as us. So they speak English.
Yeah.
It wasn't that much of a shift. And of course, we know Indian people. You live in London, you know Indian people. So there's a familiarity coming both ways there.
Yeah.
But that was what the Comedy Store did. Was you did one weekend, and then they let you stay in the hotel for a week and do a second weekend. Oh, Richard, it was fantastic.
I bet that was incredible.
So much. Some of the comedians were popping down to Goa to have a little camping holiday in that week.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
I bet that was amazing.
Such a fantastic thing.
Wow.
And I think most of that is finished now, unless you're a big star.
Yeah. It's such a shame. It really is. Let's move back to the UK. I've seen you perform many times over the years, brilliantly. Most notably, Always Be Comedy, headlining in 2017. I saw it was the Beer Cat Comedy Club. That's what I was trying to remember in Hanwell in 2018. And most notably, headliners. I see you there many times.
That's one of my favourites.
In Chiswick, you're famous for headlining that. With your routines and shows, can you describe if you've got a writing process or where you get your ideas from for shows? Or...
Okay. Well, that's changed. That process has changed as I learn how to do it.
Right.
I think we always think it's about sitting at the desk, writing big routines and then taking them out and trying them. I think the way I work is that I might sit at the desk to kickstart an idea, and then I walk around with the idea away from the desk.
Right.
So the initial premise might be at the desk on a piece of paper. Although I've stopped using the laptop, because when you write on a laptop, you write reams and reams, and it becomes like a sort of Guardian comment piece. So I've learned after all these years that for me the best way to write is pen and paper, because then you can keep it clipped and to the point, which is what we end up doing with the big piece anyway.
Yeah.
And so I start in that way, then I walk around with it, and then I take it on stage. So it's a 3-way process. The desk, walking around with it, and then seeing what happens once I take it on stage. And then maybe back to the desk and around and round. But it's difficult. I'm not very good at talking about my own creative process.
Right.
I'm not quite sure what it is. And I quite like to leave it like that.
That's exactly.
Away secrets. I'm quite happy. I'm not quite sure that there's something indefinable about it, because that keeps the magic for me.
That's fantastic. And I think as well, it creates a uniqueness as well, so people can remember who you are because you're unique.
But what I will say is that, and it's taken me quite a few years to learn lots of things about how it works, is that when you're new, you think it's going to be about routines. And of course, your routines have to be good.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line, Richard. It's about the relationship you have with the audience with those routines. And it's difficult to explain that. It's quite difficult to teach that because it seems quite abstract and nuanced. But it's how you are with that routine, not just the routine.
Yeah.
And that's the thing you can't write. That's the thing you learn and feel and know through experience. Because the same routine performed by somebody else may not be funny. It's the relationship you have with, and it's also not just the routine, it's what happens around the routine, the texture, the asides, the ad-libs on the material. So it's very difficult you have to find that yourself, but certainly the routines are the scaffold, the foundation.
That's fascinating.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. What a great answer.
I'm not giving away secrets. I don't want anyone copying this.
That is fascinating. Really great.
Thank you.
Who are your favourite comedians, past and present? Did you have
That's very
comedy
difficult.
growing up?
Well, I think growing up, when you consider that I'm 65, so
Wow.
growing up, there was lots of stand-up comedy around, on TV, on the radio. I've always considered stand-up comedy to be very much part of British culture.
Very
That's
much so.
why it exists in expat communities.
Yeah.
Wherever there's a load of British people, there'll be a comedy club somewhere in the world. And so there's always stand-up comedy, but I would have to say, as far as British comedians, before my time, and someone who I've studied, if you like, is Max Miller.
Oh, brilliant.
Max Miller is someone who stands out for me.
Yeah.
Well, again, that relationship he has with the audience, particularly that iconic piece where I'm not sure what theatre it is, where he comes to the edge of the stage, talking conspiratorially with the audience about the managers at the side. You know that piece? I don't know if you know.
He's looking around. It's brilliant.
I shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah. Come here. And he leans in, doesn't he? He's brilliant.
It's so fantastic.
Yeah. And I love the blue book and the red book.
Oh, that is just incredible. that whole, and again, it's about that relationship he's got with the audience. Again,
Yeah.
So
I saw a play about him at the Edinburgh Fringe, and it was just wonderful.
Oh, wow.
It was so good,
He's
because he had an
someone
extraordinary life.
I would say.
Yeah.
Of the modern era, or certainly the modern compared to Max Miller, has been Alexei Sayle for sure.
Oh, mate.
That late 70s, early 80s, I particularly admire. And then, of course, he's had a renaissance, hasn't he? He's come back. He wrote novels and he came back and he's just as
fantastic.
Good as ever was. I love his... Here's a joke that I think really sums up everything about Alexei Sayle, the politics, the working classness, and it's this. He's got this joke, and I may be getting this wrong, but it's certainly... He's got a joke about it. It's something like this, yeah? My dad was a communist and a big Liverpool fan. Above our mantelpiece, we had a picture of Lenin scoring the winning goal for Liverpool in the 1962 World Cup final. It was, or a European final, it was the best retouching job the KGB had ever done. Intelligent, political references.
Oh, he was brilliant.
And that, for me, so Alexei Sayle is somebody who possibly,
good
on an unconscious level, has influenced me. But,
that's brilliant.
But I really, though, I would say the American comedians I always think are far ahead. You think about Lenny Bruce, he's years ahead. He's like John Coltrane.
Yeah.
You know, what he was doing in the 50s, is still advanced now.
Yeah.
I think the American, the way they speak English suits itself to stand-up comedy, their turn of phrase, the language.
Totally agree, yeah.
Lenny Bruce, and most of the Americans, Richard Pryor, of course.
Yeah.
And of the modern era, quite like Bill Burr, he had quite an interesting attitude. But certainly I would say, if I were to choose one, I'd probably go for Alexei Sayle.
What a choice, that's brilliant. My first ever gig was on a family holiday in Scarborough. I was 7, and we went to see Les Dawson. And he was just incredible. He's in my top 5. And then a year later, we went to see Tommy Cooper, and he was just extraordinary.
There have been so many great comedians.
Yeah. That was the 70s. But I've seen absolutely everybody. I went through the alternative boom, like you say. Highlight was we went to see Rick Mail in Carlisle. And his trousers exploded as he jumped on stage. And he then threw somebody out because he wasn't laughing. That was brilliant. But I love the American comedians like yourself. We were very, very fortunate to see Bill Hicks in Manchester, and he was extraordinary. Just ranting away, but so clever and so intelligent and so on the ball with it all.
I think I'm particularly attracted to sort of East Coast New York Jewish influence.
Yeah.
And I think that Jewish influence is an influence on all stand-up comedy, actually.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we are blessed that there are so many on the circuit and so many yet to see. It is extraordinary.
Definitely.
As I said, I think I said earlier, I've got 1,000+ comedians now, which is amazing. Following on from that, like me, do you ever go to watch comedy as a member of the audience? Have you ever done this?
Well, before I started doing comedy, I think I'd only ever been to one comedy club.
Wow.
And that was around 86. And in Forest Gate, above a pub called the Princess Alice. So that was obviously one of the many alternative comedy clubs that started springing up around that time.
Yeah.
And it was Jim Tavray was on, I remember.
Oh, superb.
It's easy to remember, isn't he? He's a great joke writer.
Yeah.
And I can't actually remember who else was on, but I hadn't been to see stand-up comedy. And I think it's, like I said, you know, I'd seen stand-up comedy on TV all the time. So I knew how it worked. You know, I knew the cadence, the rhythm.
Yeah. If you're
doing it, I've been to see Jackie Mason.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I've been to see one or two American acts.
Yeah.
But I don't watch a lot of stand-up comedy, funnily enough. I don't know. I think musicians are like that as well.
Yeah.
They don't really.
That's
I don't know why that is. But obviously there are one or two people that I work with that I enjoy.
Yeah.
Watching, hang around to watch.
I was going to say, if you're on a bill, do you hang around and watch the other comedians?
There are one or two people. I mean, unfortunately, when you've been going for years, and I don't mean this in a cynical way, often with some acts, you know what they're doing immediately. So, yeah, I know where you're going with this.
Yeah.
The audience love you, but I know where you're going, so there's no, you know. But now and again, somebody very unique, I don't know, let's think of somebody of one of my contemporaries would be somebody like Bobby Mayer. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's somebody that I watch all the time because what he does is so different and unique. And also it's so different from what I do. I enjoy watching people that do Russell Hicks, for example.
Yeah, superb.
An improvisational comic.
Yeah.
I enjoy watching him because I think, how does he do that? I don't work like that. So I enjoy watching people that do it in a very different way.
Yeah. The reason I asked the question is there's a section in my blog called The Ones That Got Away, and I've written about 25, I think, comedians that I would love to have seen, and I've been unable to. And top of the tree for me, obviously, were Morecambe and Wise. They're the reason why I do it. But there's people like Dave Allen in there, Norman Wisdom, Frankie Howard. I've never seen there is a comedian whose name I mislaid, which is very bad.
Well, the old days, from the old days.
From the old days, yeah. There was a great comedian who used to make me laugh a lot, and he used to go on and say his catchphrase was, "I won't take my coat off, I'm not stopping," and then take his coat off and do his act. But he was from way back. But there is this uniqueness throughout the decades. I'm learning that a reason why comedians are so popular, and that a lot of them are very endearing. So it's just wonderful to research and watch and analyse and let's move on to the future of comedy. What do you think the future is? Have you done any online gigs? What do you think of online gigs as opposed to live comedy?
Well, I don't think the future of stand-up comedy is online gigs.
No.
I think there's lots of future in stand-up comedy. There are lots of new people coming into it.
Yeah.
I think the future of stand-up comedy in terms of acts is probably going to be the wealth of people that come from a range of ethnicities and gender differences. I think that's where the future is. I'm particularly interested in British acts who have a different immigrant ethnicity, who are bringing their experience, using stand-up comedy in the same way that hip-hop is in France or Africa. It's a medium by which people who are on the margins of mainstream society can have their say and can reflect their experience. So they're the people I look at and think, yeah, these people are saying something. So that's why I think the actual future of comedy is. But in terms of what medium, it will always be live for me.
It's got to
I don't even really like watching it on TV. So Zoom, I think there's a role for Zoom, maybe, that would be the private party, for example, or the private work do. But it doesn't reflect stand-up comedy properly. Stand-up comedy, for me, is a live medium. For sure, that's where you experience it at its best. So I'm going to risk saying that Zoom was an anomaly, a blip, and it will be around for some reasons, but certainly it's not the future of stand-up comedy. Neither is TV.
I totally agree. I mean, when we were in lockdown, I did go to a lot of online comedy, and it helped me enormously get through it. But when they first started, there was no audio at all for the audience, so you couldn't hear an audience laugh. So I was sitting here looking at four walls. I thought I was going to be taken away with my laugh because you couldn't hear me. But then they opened it up, and some of the comedians did very good with timing, and they could chat to the audience. But I'm 100% with you. You cannot beat the live experience, because I think, as we said earlier on, it's of its moment, and you never know what's going to happen, and that's the magic of it, you know. And looking forward to it, like you say, when you're ironing your shirts with me, it's looking on bills, and I'm going to have a great time here. The venue, I like to go for a few drinks beforehand and then go in and make a night of it. It's just wonderful, the whole experience.
From a performance point of view, I found it a very empty feeling.
Yeah.
Not edifying in any way whatsoever, and actually very easy. I think, I wonder if some comedians think they're better than they are if they've grown up on Zoom.
No.
You know, because I think it's quite easy to get some laughs and entertain people that are sitting on their lounge. We'll see. But live, there's so much more involved.
Exactly. And it's and you're going for the positive experience as well, which.
Yes. And the shared experience.
Very much so. I could talk to you all night, my friend. I really could. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you.
This has been great. It's been the best podcast interview I've been on. You know that?
Well, that's very, very kind of you. That's so good.
You know what you're doing. You know comedy. I feel safe in your hands. You ask some pertinent, relevant questions. So I've enjoyed my time with you.
Thank you so much, my friend. Just before we go, is there anything else you'd like to say? Where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, it's so funny because there's a young comedian who's doing my Instagram for me, and he keeps saying, you must remember to plug these things. So I've got it, and I forget because I'm old school, you know. I was doing it on stage last week at the end of the gig. I said, look, I must do this, otherwise this guy's going to tell me off. And every night he was saying, yeah, we've got 10 people tonight. And in the end, it became more about the Instagram. I said, I'm not interested in the comedy. You can have the Instagram followers now. That's what's important to me. So I've got an Instagram. It's either called Jeff Innocent or something. You know, so if you find Instagram and Jeff Innocent, that will be the one. So please join that or follow that or whatever. I've got a Twitter account, of course. Jeff or Jeff Innocent.
Have you got a website?
I've got a website. People don't really go on websites so much now, but there will be a new website. It's under construction.
Sure.
It will be jeffinnocent.com or thereabouts.
And
also doing workshops up to Creek at the end of the year. I'll be teaching stand-up comedy, running 6-week workshops. There's another thing that I really enjoy.
Yeah. Why not teach it? Yeah, that's a great idea.
Intermediaries or even people that have been doing it for a few years.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm up to, and I'm in the process of. I'm thinking I want to do an hour show, not to go to Edinburgh, but there are so many festivals now, Richard, as you know. So I'm in the process of thinking about. I love being a circuit comedian, but I like to stand stage for longer than 20 minutes. So in order to do that, I need to write a new show.
Well, so I'm trying to do as many different festivals as I can because I'm not going to go up to Edinburgh this year, but I've been to Brighton. I'm going to Hastings this weekend. There's Camden, which I've never done before, so I might do that in August. And it's the experience, as you say, of going round to them all. It's wonderful.
That's what I want to do. And of course, that's not going to, unlike Edinburgh, which costs you anything from 4 to 10 grand or can do, or lose money. Yeah. Those festivals are a one-off experience for me. I can go to Brighton, do one night. And go back to the circuit. So I'm looking for that mix and blend now for the future. That's what I'm going to be about, Richard.
Have you got any gigs coming up, my friend?
Well, I don't know when this is going to be aired. This. So
Yeah, I suppose so. But you're
well,
gigging all the time, aren't you?
But you know me, Richard. I'm always everywhere.
Well,
everywhere. You know, particularly in London, the Comedy Store, Up the Creek, Headliners. Brighton at the Comedia. I'm everywhere that there's comedy. You'll find me because I love doing it so much.
Well, I, for one, love watching you, and I genuinely, I think you're one of the funniest people I've ever met.
That's a lovely thing to say, and I'd use you as a quote on my next. When I get my website, I'm going to use that quote.
Please do, please do.
This guy knows what he's talking about more than lots of reviewers.
You're very, very kind, and
thank you.
If you want to leave me a testimonial, please do on my blog.
I think I'm going to try and get you on my... Oh,
yeah.
I'm doing a podcast as well, sorry.
Yeah, please talk about it.
I've got a podcast that I've just started working on.
Yeah.
I don't know when they're coming out. We've only just started interviewing people and we want to put a few out at the same time. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, but we've decided to do it in a studio rather than on Zoom.
Right.
So it's a little bit harder to pin people down to come into a studio. It's a lot easier to say to people, can you be in your house at this time? But we're getting around that, and I think studios will be coming back. It's called Smart Casual, and that's the name of the podcast with Jeff Innocent. So,
well, I would be delighted to be a guest on yours.
I'd love to have you on.
And I'm around at the end of July and all August if you're up for that.
That's fantastic. We can talk about your comedy life.
Yeah, very much so. It's been extraordinary.
You know that, Richard? I think you deserve that, my friend.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you so much for being truly a wonderful guest.
Yeah, bless you, man.
And you're a very, very funny
really
man.
Enjoyed it.
And I'm looking forward to seeing you again live soon, mate.
Thank you, Richard.
All the best to you.
See you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
now.